Welcome back. You're now watching the lifestyle segment of the weekend show, brought to you by Holo Crunch, crunchy, yummy goodness. Today, our topic of discussion is living with disabilities. We'll be talking to the family members of those people living with disabilities in Nigeria. We all know that on January 23rd, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari signed into law the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Act 2018, following 9 years of relentless advocacy by disability rights groups and activists. According to the World Health Organization's 2011 World Disability Report, about 15% of Nigeria's population, which is about 25 million people, have a disability. Many of them face a number of human rights abuses, including stigma, discrimination, violence, and lack of access to healthcare, housing, and education. Nigeria, as we know, also ratified the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities in 2007 and its optional protocol in 2010. Since then, civil society groups and people with disabilities have called on the government to put it into practice. In 2011 and 2015, the National Assembly passed the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Bill, but former President Goodluck Jonathan declined to sign it into law. The bill for the new law was passed by the House of Representatives and the Senate Joint Committee in November 2016, but was not sent to Buhari for signature until December 2018. On January 17th, Buhari denied on national television that he had received the bill, and hundreds of people protested, and barely 5 days later, he signed the bill into law. The law prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability and imposes sanctions, including fines and prison sentences, on those who contravene it. It also stipulates a 5-year transitional period of modifying public buildings, structures, and automobiles to make them accessible and usable for people living with disabilities. The law will also establish a national commission for persons with disabilities responsible for ensuring that people with disabilities have access to housing, education, and healthcare. The commission will be empowered to receive complaints of rights violations and support victims to seek legal redress, amongst others. The enactment of the Discrimination Against Persons Living with Disabilities Act is only a first step to the fulfillment of Nigeria's obligations under the CRPD. Authorities should now put effective measures in place for its full implementation to ensure equal treatment and participation of people living with disabilities across Nigeria. Joining me on today's program to discuss this issue, we have Mayowa Afolabi, right-hand best-selling author, mentor, and speaker. We have Mrs. Biboara Yinkere, convener the Engraced One Prayer Support and Advocacy Initiative, which is a support group for special needs. And we have Ify Okenyi, who is no stranger to the weekend show. She's a lawyer and founder of Siblings of Special Needs Foundation Nigeria. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let me start with you, Ify. You've been on the program before. We've had several discussions. With this act that the President signed in 2019, do you believe the plight and the circumstances of those living with disabilities has improved?
It's a push forward. I mean, having this entirely has been, it's shown that there's some concern and it's reaching the right ears. There's still a lot to take in and there's still a lot to do. We still need a lot of different stakeholders with the right categories of disabilities to be part of the process while they're seeking doing everything for the Commission to take precedence. We still have, just to sensitize the society, there's still a lack of knowledge still going through. Even though this law has now been placed, do the authorities, do they know this? The medical facilities, the medical personnel, do they know about these things? We've had series of issues with medical personnel, especially dealing with people with disabilities the wrong way. Yesterday there was a Persons with Disability Network town hall meeting, and it was on sexual reproduction health and sexual discrimination against women. And it's still ongoing. So even if this law has already taken effect, how do we now conveying these things to the people that need to know about them? So there's a long way to go about it, but at least it's a push.
You see, the Act said that in the next 5 years, from 2019, there would be enactment of this laws that prohibits, setting infrastructure, business infrastructures from discriminating with persons with disabilities. So if you go to a bank, for instance, I remember when my sister sprained her ankle, there was no ramp for them to for her to actually access the bank. And that made us think it's so unfortunate that something has to happen to you first before you actually realize the plight of others. But that made us think that the people who actually live with these disabilities, how do they access regular banking? So stuff like that. This act now states that this cannot continue to happen. So Afolabi, in your own perspective, have you seen any change in infrastructure and seen any modalities implemented in making halls and automobiles more accessible to people living with disabilities?
Well, firstly, to start with, as a person, I am just hearing about consenting to that particular law, which means that the required awareness is not in place already. So there's need for more awareness, not just signing the bill into law. Kudos to Mr. President for signing the bill into law, but we need to do more in getting the community, the people that are required, aware about that particular law, and let's set system in motion for the actualization of the content of the bill to make sure every systems and organization follow up with the bill. We could see some ramps in some buildings, in some stores and all, but it's not yet that common. I'm also a structural engineer. You see some designs of some public building that are not, the ramps are not included in it. So there's need for systems to be set into place to make sure that the people that are required follow through to the dictates and to the content of such act and bill.
I'm so happy you talked about sensitization because the act actually states that people living with disabilities can sue, if they go to a public institution and they see that they're not actually following these laws laid down. So we need to be able to, the media also, we have a responsibility to promote, the stipulations of this law and actually ensure that people know their rights. That if you're a person living with disabilities, it's your right to be able to access public buildings and what have you. Mrs. Biboara, let me bring you in here. You have a child living with disability. How has it been for you as a mother? Can you just share your story?
Yeah, thank you. Let me just go a little backwards to talk about the law, the acts or whatever. You see, for me as a parent, it doesn't make much difference, because before you even talk about public buildings or ramp and all of those, that's somebody living with this disability that has evolved, that has grown to a certain level, and it takes a whole lot to get to that level where you even talk about somebody living with disability, suing and insisting, self-advocating. It starts from the rudiments, that's the family level. It starts from you having your baby and the doctor looks at you and tells you, this child is not going to do well. And, oh, madam, we are sorry. You just have to get lots of people to support you. This child is not going to do well, and don't expect much from this child. It starts from that level, because when you get to hear that, if you don't have something inside of you, a lot of inner strength, you can't even cope with that situation. And we have lots of people now. We have orphanages in Ibadan, in Abuja here, where they take care of only children living with special needs. It has come to that because the easiest thing to do is just to throw away this child because of what you even hear from the hospitals, from the onset of the start of the child's life, So now having this child all to yourself and you are ignorant, you don't know anything about this condition. Like I have my daughter lives with Down syndrome, and I had my daughter, and the doctor said, have you ever heard of Down syndrome? I said, yeah, I think I've seen them on TV dancing or something, and that was all I knew. And he said, okay, congrats. He checked the heart. He said, oh, congratulations, yours is not such a bad case. Her heart is okay, congrats. And that's it. And I was left all alone with my child, And so it's really a problem because for you, my child is 8 years old now. We have done, for her to get to the level she is, my family has spent so much. So much has gone under the bridge. We've suffered a lot of rejection at some point and all of that. It's a whole lot. It's a whole lot. So the act doesn't, I don't think it captures, it's a good, like if he said it's a step in the right direction, but I don't think it captures the real issues.
If you had the opportunity to amend, what would you change about it and what would you add?
It's special needs has to do with 3 areas: the healthcare, the education, and the social life of that person. So I think all these things should be put into place. We have lots of people. In fact, I got to know about the special needs rights acts, the acts of the rights of the special child towards education in Nigeria. When I started advocating, there's something like that. There are things before this act that President Buhari assented to. There are lots of other small things along the line that they need to implement.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the law isn't necessarily the problem. It's actually the implementation of these laws that already exist. And if you let me bring you in here, there's this stigma around children living with disabilities. How do we go about breaking that stigma? How do we go about breaking that barrier? We've talked about education. The work that we're doing here right now is education. But how do we take this message to the rural level? Because you see cases where children living with disabilities are branded witches or wizards and they're maltreated, which obviously the law says is a crime, and punishable by fine or imprisonment. But how do we take this message down to that level to teach them that children living with disabilities are just like you and I,
We need to get to that point where we understand that disability, any category of disability, is not a word to fear. It's a person to love. If you think about it, like, there's no lot in life. This could be your child, this could be my child. Then you remove that stigma from it accounting to somebody else. I think we don't have, we've not had the right education pretty much and inclusiveness in our upbringing here in the society, in the African society. We look at this thing as though it's a foreign myth or it's a spiritual issue. We're so religious and contained in that spirituality that we forget that the next person is just like you, and the lot that they took in life was just that, and it could happen to any of us. But for the mother, in the illiterate mother that maybe English is not even her first language, how do you start translating that information to her? She's in a rural area where she doesn't have that information. She probably doesn't know about this bill or any other, and she's not getting that training. Is to get to that point where you are taking that training to them, you're taking those information to those areas to get them to understand what's going on, because it's very prevalent. We've had situations where mothers tell us, oh, this doctor, this quack, this person has said to us to bring this amount of money to buy one drug, to buy one cure. But for them, they feel as though they're actually doing something to help or better that child. But because they don't have the right information, they just decide, okay, maybe we should do this and do that. We're so entrenched in our beliefs here that we're not open to other things that might benefit us because we fear what we don't know. And this is something that we don't know. We understand sensory and physical impairment, but when it has to do with an intellectual disability like Down syndrome and CP, it's like, okay, it's out of my hand. Let me just go the other way. So we still need to get to that place where we see every single child that we think is uncommon as common, and just get to understand that. We should take the social model first by not thinking that that child is a fault, something to fix, but something that we all have to come together and try to understand the child first of all.
Interesting. And when you say coming together, the immediate thing that comes to my mind is the resources that it takes, the enormous resources.
It's a whole lot.
It's a lot. That it takes to raise a child living with disabilities. The Osasu Show Foundation, we specialize in sending children to school and empowering a lot of women, especially in the rural areas. Yeah. And one of the children that we're sending to school lives with disabilities, and his school fees is the most expensive school fees out of the entire lot. And while this is work that we enjoy doing, being able to help out and to reach out, it's not necessarily you know, sustainable in the long run, because that school fees is quite enormous unless we obviously grow and expand within the years. So in terms of healthcare and education, Afolabi, when you look at the enormous cost it is to parents with children or siblings with children living with disability, to people living with disabilities, how do you think those of us in the private sector can sort of come in? We know what government needs to do in terms of subsidizing healthcare and education, but what can those of us in the private sector do to help in a sustainable manner?
Okay, thank you for that particular question, but I'm going to bring in government together with the private sector, because to me, the private sector may not have the requisite understanding of the Department of this disability if the government does not project the awareness that is needed for people to know about it. Like for instance, now we talk about the president has sent it to this disability bill. Now there is a subset called autism. Most persons don't know autism. Prelude to this event, I was asking some people, do you know what autism is all about? Most persons say they don't know. So there's need for government to create an awareness, so that from that awareness, the private organizations get to know about what autism is all about and what disability sections are all about. Then you see that private organizations will take up responsibility in sponsoring and supporting, because as a parent of a child that is autistic with Down syndrome, there is need for help and support from both the government and the private sector. But to me, I think the government must take up the awareness campaign of the disability needs and then the autistic need. You know, I read about the UK House of Commons passing a particular act, a subset of disability bill called Autism Act in the year 2009. So we need to break down the bill the president has sent to pulling out the Autism Act from that particular bill. Because there are a lot of kids that are living with autism, and the parents don't even understand the kids, not to talk of the people around. So there's need.
They might just think they're misbehaving or not paying enough attention, not knowing that there's actually...
knowing there's a particular, you understand. So when I had my son is also about 7 years now, it was a hell of trouble for me. You know, we came to the hospital and the doctor told us almost exactly the same thing they told her. That we should be patient with the boy, and then the boy will overcome these particular things that we're complaining. But it was hell of trouble taking care of this child. So we went home with the assurance from that particular doctor telling us that the child is going to overcome. But the child to overcome, we are discovering several new things that we never saw in the older brother of this child. So there's need for clear awareness first. That is to me, and it's going to start from the government. The government is going to come out, taking responsibility for this thing, letting people know about it. And then when the government has already marshaled out a step and the guideline, then I think the private sector can come up and take up the campaign, because the private sector may not know what to do if they don't know such things exist.
So for the parents who are watching today, and what are some of the signs that they can look out for in their children? Because as you said, the medical practitioners have failed us to an extent in identifying what these issues are and giving us the appropriate advice. So what are some of the signs that they can look out for in their kids, and what are the next steps that they can take?
Specifically, autism is a development disorder that comes with some communication problem and some social disorder. Like for instance, my particular son, who is 7 years old, is having speech problem. The speech is not that clear now. Now, when we heard him, the delivery was so perfect and good, but we just discovered that the feeding wasn't too good. It wasn't feeding too well. And then we wouldn't stand him to walk the first year of his birthday. His older brother walked earlier than first year. 1.5 years, he was not going to walk. He walked, I think, the 7th day after the 2nd year. These are some signs the parents can look at when the development of the child looks abnormal, in quote. Now, when the child is not crawling when it's supposed to crawl, when the child is not responding the time it's supposed to respond, when the child is not acting in a quote normal now, then the such parents should suspect and come out and ask questions, and then maybe go to the hospital and ask questions for more inquiry.
But there are some kids that are also at the low end of the spectrum that you might not be able to easily identify. If you can talk to me more about that, because I've heard of instances where children just lack the focus. So they can they have the whole physical mobility and everything, but they just lack the focus in terms of the education and taking instructions. But parents see that as, you know, the children being disobedient or just too playful. So they never really are able to identify that on time. So what are some tips you can give us for children who are on the lower end of the spectrum of disabilities
I think
such
for
as
parents,
autism?
for me, parents are the key, especially when it comes to children that have special education needs. They need to understand, first of all, that when we say the word autism, autism is a wide spectrum. So it includes things like HDD, Asperger's, and these sort of like someone would say, okay, you're on this spectrum, you're on this spectrum. But what it means pretty much is that it's like a ruler. So a child could be on 1 on that ruler, another child could be on 100. So they are all on the same spectrum, but different angles. So a child on the higher end of the spectrum could be a genius. It could have some savant abilities that you can now cultivate. A child on the lower spectrum, you find maybe the child does not respond to their name. They don't respond to eye contact. They're not likely to touch. And most times you find that they have really, most of them are hyper. So a child that is ADHD, and that is hyperactive, you could think, okay, this child probably just misbehaves. But there are other disabilities, there are dual diagnoses that could be in this place where the child is. So parents need to look out for the child's hearing, the child's eyesight. Those are very, very key things. The developmental hack, you've had children that regress. So a child of maybe a year-old that was actually speaking or making sounds and then just regresses and stops totally. So most times you hear parents say, no, but he was talking before, something must have happened, somebody must have done something. And those things are common. So you need a lot of parents to get that information first. And for medical practitioners and medical personnel that maybe do not have the information at hand, one thing we're trying to appeal is for them to just refer those parents instead of just leaving them hanging. Refer those parents, if you maybe a school or to a referral center, like we're a referral center and we work with families, mostly families. So just don't leave the parents hanging. Don't just tell the parents to take the child home. Get something, get some information, get referral points, look for the right places. If you can't handle a situation, just get them referred so that that child, at least there's a progression to his management, there's a progression to his life, further life. Don't just leave parents hanging because it's really, really terrible. My parents' situation was very different. This was in the late 80s when they had my sister, and there was no diagnosis in Nigeria. We got her diagnosis in the UK. And till now, there isn't a spectrum diagnosis center in Nigeria. It just doesn't make any sense that till now, a lot of practitioners, I don't know if it's in their curriculum, so maybe the curriculums for medical students have to be checked, but at least do something. You have a duty of care to your patients. Refer parents to the right places so that they even have something to look forward to try to better their child. They're not asking for much.
Most definitely. And I see, yes.
Yeah, you see, like, in fact, it's really complex because you know, generally, there are like 8 classes of special needs. Now, we are just talking about autism. And like she said, it's a spectrum. So it's different from the next person. And because of that, it's really a problem. And when it comes to autism, most people think, oh, it's something spiritual. I have a friend, she just can't believe that somebody didn't jazz her child because, like she talked about regression, this is somebody that was in school, she started writing. You know, autism has a late onset, 18 months to 3 years. So this child has some words. The child is socializing in the family, and suddenly the child is hiding behind the chair, hiding under the table, and you definitely think something happened, probably and a relative visited you and gave your child something to eat or drink or something like that, you know. So it's difficult identifying, but they have some general traits. Children living with autism, they have ritualistic behavior. They can hold on to this glass and it's this glass or nothing else. So you watch out for that kind of behavior in your child. Then, because they have very poor social interaction, a child is maybe 3 years old, the mother is pregnant, another baby comes into the family. The child doesn't celebrate with the family, like he's not there. I watched I was in the training and somebody said something, Miss Lola Aneke said something I really love about autism. She said it's like a family having lunch or something. In a very large dining room, big table, and at first they are together. And then this child begins to withdraw. And before long, the child is sitting at the other end, alone. I read a book and they said that autism is like somebody living in the forest all alone. So when you notice that your child is in the family but not within the family, you know that something is wrong. The child started writing and suddenly stopped writing. And then for people living with Down syndrome, like my daughter, it's physical. But even at that, I had my daughter in one of the best hospitals in Abuja, and they didn't know, they didn't realize, they didn't notice anything. We were discharged and all that. She had joined this at 3 weeks. So we went to the hospital, and but I told the doctor some observations, and he was like, oh, maybe she didn't feel like crying, maybe she was feeling lazy, maybe she didn't feel, you know, like that. So when she had joined this at 3 weeks, we went back to the hospital, and all the doctors that we met, we were on admission for 3 days. Nobody noticed. It was on the day we were discharged that the main consultant came in and observed. He now asked me to give me an appointment to come again, and then he now started telling me. And I said, why did you say she has Down syndrome? And he gave me some things. He said, flat nose, low nasal bridge, flat palm. And that was when that child had been with me for 3 weeks. But I had not observed her palm. I now observed that her palms were very flat. And you know, all these lines on the palm, she had just 3. Flat feet, and her ears were small, lower than the average, you know. So, and protruding tongue. When people came to see her as a baby, they said, oh, this girl looks like a Chinese, she looks like a foreigner, she looks, but you know, that look. But the doctors, they missed it. And even because I didn't want, because at that point I was living in denial, and I didn't want anybody to tell me anything about my child, I stopped going to the hospital. I stopped seeking expert medical care. I started patronizing the healthcare centers, primary healthcare centers, government-owned healthcare centers. And of course, because I was sure that in that kind of place, they wouldn't know anything about her condition. And of course, they didn't know, you know. So these are the things. If a child living with CP, for instance, it's physical. You find the child, the body hanging, and all those kind of things. So every condition has its peculiarity, you know. So, but the bottom line is the child is missing his developmental milestones. It's something for the parents to talk about. It's something for the parents to seek information about. They have to read. Parents have to read. They have to study. They have to know a lot about the condition of their children.
When we come back from this short break, I'll be asking you more about solutions that, again, most of us can imbibe and implement in our society. And we'll also be bringing in a guest living with disability himself to discuss some solutions that all of us can implement. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on the lifestyle segment of the weekend show. Welcome back. You're still watching the lifestyle segment of the weekend show. The topic of discussion is people living with disabilities. Joining us now, and this distinguished panelist, is Daniel Osire, who lives with a disability himself. Daniel, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we reel this conversation back home, I would like to talk about solutions, lasting solutions, sustainable solutions that we all can implement. If he, in just 1 or 2 sentences, talk to me more about your organization and the work that you're doing and the impact it's been able to make in Nigeria.
Thank you. So SOS Needs was born pretty much out of an advocacy need. So it's a purely an awareness platform. And what we've been doing now is instead of happening on blaming everybody and blaming the government and blaming the infrastructure not being in place, we started off on training. So we started a community advocacy training where we get different peers from different societal demo of the country and try to get them to understand different categories of disabilities, the need for parents, the need for structural grants and support, the need to get more medical personnel involved and to get society, every one of us. So the whole point is to get every single person to look at themselves as an advocate in every single spectrum. So that's what we've been doing now. So the trainings are ongoing, it's free, and everyone's welcome.
That's amazing. How can you be reached?
We can be reached on all our social media platforms are SOS Needs NG.
Okay.
It's SOS Needs NG, and can be emailed at sosneedsng@gmail.com.
Awesome. Daniel?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for inviting me. Disability matter in Nigeria is a serious matter. Just like my sister said, she doesn't want to talk about, she doesn't want to blame anybody. Yes, we don't need to push blames on anybody right now. But the thing is, we need to do more sensitization about disability in Nigeria. Because the people who are able-bodied, in quote, a lot of people who are able-bodied, in quote, see people with disability there's a curse somewhere, you know, Abikun, there's one, they want to blame it on the devil and all that. But the truth is, disability is reality and is living with us. And some people don't see people with disability as normal people. I give you a story. I met a lady some 10 years ago, Barrister Grace. She had done her master's. She was a blind person. She had done her master's when I was talking with her. And she said, a classmate of hers met her one day and was like, Grace, you did try, you did try. And the lady was like, what am I doing? What's special about, why are you saying I did try? You come to class, say, it's not normal. Everybody comes to class, take lectures, go read and do exam, and then, so what's about? So the lady, the Grace now said to the person talking with her, said, I know, because Grace had a little girl that walks around her in school, takes her around from class to hostel and all that. So she was like, I know that if I allow you to speak now, you will say it's that girl that beats me. And she said, it's true. I've been thinking it in my mind. That girl I used to carry around is the person that beats you. That's the kind of people we have around us. Sometimes I want to take bike, someone will carry you, as big as I am. They feel like, you understand? And so we need more of sensitization, sensitizing the public. I really salute your courage, man, for what you're doing today. It's doing a lot. And the things my mama and papa here has explained to the public, it's great. A lot of people who don't know about it gets to know. Some parents even put their children at home. They don't want them to come out.
Lock them up.
Lock
They
them
lock
up.
them up.
Shame.
I have a fellow colleague where I work right now. She has someone over there that the parent has refused her to go out. And because of that, she has leg issues. Because of that, they keep going big. These are people you can allow to do things, allow them to sweep, allow them to move around, but you feel that they can't do anything because her legs are bad. And because of no exercise, they keep growing big. And they get to obese point. So the thing is, we need to talk more. We had a program yesterday, and I encouraged them that the media need to do more because people don't really know much about us. They don't know that having a disability is not a disadvantage. It's just a type of life again. So we need to mingle with ourselves. We need to be together with ourselves. We need to accept these people that they are part of us. Some parents will lock their children up and they won't want them to mingle with other children because they feel they have this disability. They don't understand it. But they are normal people. Blind people are normal people. People with leg issues, on wheelchair bound, they are normal people. Autism, they are normal. They are intelligent. Everyone having their own intelligence in their own different ways. It can be expressed in different ways. That's what the general public need to understand. That disability is not a curse. It is not. It is not a disadvantage either. It is just for us to embrace and say, look, it's people with different type of life.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, Daniel. Afolabi?
Oh, yes. I would still start with the government. While I'm saying my sister said she does not want to blame anybody. But for a wider reach of this thing we're talking about, the government has to be responsible. Yes, the private sector is going to come up and they're going to do a lot of things. One of the things that the government is supposed to do, for instance, I'm talking about autism now, there's need for us to enact the Autism Act. Do a research and then get a structure on autism in Nigeria, because autistic kids are multiplying in Nigeria everywhere. They are multiplying. They are there. Like he said, I know a lot of families, couple of families, who wouldn't let their kids come out. They lock up these autistic kids. They feel that they associating with them is reducing their personality in the society. So because of that, they want to lock them up away from the people. So there's need to enact an autism act urgently in Nigeria, and then we run with it. That's number one. And then number two, there's need for training and retraining of medical personnel. I was disappointed the medical or advices or stops we've gotten for the past over 7 years now. It started with a doctor telling us that the child is going to overcome some of these things. Why we don't, as parents, we don't know more about the autism stuff that we're talking about there. Yeah. So there's need for training and retraining of medical personnel, that when they see these situations, they will be able to put through the parent what they need to do. And then there's need to have autism laboratories where you can do diagnosis and put these autistic kids on a particular spectrum. Like I'm talking today now, my son is going to be 7 this May. Till now, we've not been able to put him on a particular spectrum because there's no diagnostic center. At the point, I was thinking of taking him out of the country until we started meeting a lot of people who were learning, who were coming around to tell us and then to tell us more about it. And we are spending money by the day. Spending more and money by the day on something that we are not totally too sure of as parents. Like for instance, my son is having a therapy of almost several hours over the week, that an hour of therapy is thousands of naira. So I just have to do that in the name of helping that particular child. So there's need to build the diagnostic laboratory specifically for autistic children, so that they can be diagnosed, and then they can give some therapy for particular spectrum of these autistics. And then also awareness in the community. We go all out with this child. Even to church, religious places, you see people drawing drawing their children away from this child. Yeah. Maybe he has thrown a little tantrum and they just saw him that maybe something is with him. The next thing they withdraw. Yeah. You know, this thing is not supposed to be. These people are human beings. We have read about this woman, Grandin Temple in the United States of America, who is an innovator. It's an autistic woman. But he innovated today something that is monumental in cattle ranching and slaughterhouse operation. It's an innovator. So these people can contribute to national development if things are done perfectly well and they are not segregated from the society. So there's a lot of things to be done from the part of the president, from the part of the government, not the president as a latest, from the part of the government. And I think a national assembly can start this with some robust legislation, with some not just stereotype. We need to have a robust legislation, a well-explained, spelled-out legislation, and then government start it, and then private sector who are knowledgeable about disabilities and the subset of this disability take on a voluntary work to contribute to the community, and then raise awareness to these things.
Most definitely. Thank you so much, Afolabi. Finally, Mrs. Biboara.
Yes, okay, thank you. Sorry, my thoughts are like going back and forth. So, well, I'll just react to something he said about the medical aspect now. I have this friend in our group. Her daughter is 18 years old, and for the first 14 years of the child's life, they were like, this girl is living with Down syndrome. And all of a sudden, the mother said, oh, my daughter is living with autism. Asperger's. I was like, when did how come now? Sure, you have been talking Down syndrome. Suddenly, you know, and even now that they are telling her that the girl is living with autism, from the little research I've done on autism, that child is not living with, that young lady is not living with autism. You know, they've not been able to come up with what that she's living with, you know. So we need diagnostic centers. Yeah. We are tired of guesswork. We need to be sure that this is what we are managing. They said that when you know, okay, half of your problem is solved when you know you even know what you're contending with. So most parents don't know what they are contending with. And this mother I'm talking about, she's an elitist mother. She's not like the kind of mother on the streets, you know. So imagine what happens to lots of people out there. They really don't know. I go to a lot of places to talk about this, and some people would, after I finish speaking, they'll say, okay, can we see you outside? They don't even want to like publicly identify
their own children,
you know,
yes.
And that's the problem. I've worked with children almost all my life in church and all of that. It took my daughter for me to know what these things are. So a lot of adults, I've seen those kind of children in church. I was like, okay, I didn't even think they were hearing what we were talking about in Sunday school. I was in a church I taught children 12 years ago. I was there last month, January. And because I now know about the children, I started asking about a particular girl. Because over the years, I discovered, okay, this girl was living with cerebral palsy. And I was in home cell with her mother. Her mother was always sharing testimony of how the girl came first and all that. And I used to think, what was she talking about? I didn't know that child could learn. Yeah. I didn't know the child was listening. I didn't know that they were spiritual beings. And by the way, there is no disability in eternity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whether you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, whatever, there's no disability in eternity. So I started asking about the girl, and they said, oh, see, look at the girl coming. This girl saw me from a distance. She ran and jumped on me. I was like, I didn't know she could recognize me. She has graduated, she's doing her NYSC. You know, so a lot can happen. They're talking about who can actually help. Yeah, I don't even want to talk about what the government should do. The government knows what it should do, really. I concentrate on what we can do as individuals. And thank you for what you are doing. I want to throw the challenge actually to the media. There's so much discussion. I like to listen to discussions on radio when I go to work and all that. From one channel to the other, the president coughs. Oh, why did he cough this way? Must he cough this way? Must he not cough that way? Must he sneeze this way? And it's all of that. Yes. And sometimes I'm like, these people are talking like this because they don't know issues. Maybe they don't know enough issues to talk about. You know, and when we have programs, we organize a lot of programs in our NGO, which we fund by ourselves, you know, and we invite the media for the coverage, and when they want to ask you a question, they're like, what is the government? Sometimes I say, no, we are not about that. We are about what we can do. And sometimes the moment they come for coverage, I'm sorry to say, you know, once you have the media come for our programs, they want to interview and just go away.
To the honorarium.
And I'm always stubborn. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm always heady. I'm like, no, let's do this aspect first. No, let's do this first. Let's do this first. There's something I want you to see first before the interview. I don't want them to just interview me and rush away. Yeah. I want them to understand the issues. They need to know the issues. And if they don't know the issues, they won't report correctly.
Exactly.
They won't report correctly. You know, so these things need to be done. We are parents. Mind you, we are a group of parents and other individuals who just love children. And it's self-financed. We spend the money, we gather money from our little salaries, meager salaries. We bring money together. Parents should not be sponsoring advocacy for special needs when they should even be supported, be funded. I tell people, my husband is a general in the Nigerian military. It's not easy on my family managing my daughter.
It's not easy.
It's not easy.
It's expensive.
Some schools spend 700,000.
In term.
And some schools, sometimes it's even monthly.
Yeah.
Their school fees, they charge monthly.
Yeah.
You spend 200,000 monthly, 100,000 monthly, 300,000 monthly, and then you are not even sure of what they can achieve for your child.
You have other children
after
in the
paying
home.
and paying and paying, they will not say, okay, your child is just not responding right. There's nothing specific, you know. So we do all of that. We talk to, we go to churches, rural, we talk to lots of people. We go to clubs, to schools, secondary schools and primary schools. They have clubs. Yeah, we raise young advocates, we provide T-shirts and all that for them just to get them interested. And we go there, we visit those schools, we talk to them, we believe in catching them young. We don't even want to go near the government. We are talking about people that our children relate with every day. He talked about churches. I have stories to tell about churches. You take your child to church, and we are going there for your spiritual succor. And one child will just turn like this and it's like looking at your child the whole service. And they're laughing. My daughter dances a lot. When she's dancing, they're laughing.
They don't have that inclusiveness.
They'll say, look at the way she's licking her feet. And I wonder, even children, can they be so mean? You know,
it's the ignorance.
The ignorance and the empathy level that we have
here. I
here.
church one day, and the role I went to sit down, someone had to stand and left that row.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I will affect him with blindness. I don't know for him. But he left.
They feel it's good.
So the recurring themes I hear from each one of you, it's the integral need for sensitization
Yes.
across all states, you know, from the federal to the state to the local government, you know, ensuring that people understand what disabilities means. It's not coronavirus. You're not going to get
You're
it
not
from
gonna get it.
interacting with someone.
It's not infectious. There's no disability that
Interacting
is
with
infectious.
someone that has a disability, and also the need for proper advocacy and sponsorship. Also, as I said, with the foundation, we're sending a child to school with disability, and we already know the enormous constraints it puts on us as a foundation. So I can imagine each and every single one of you here, either living with disability or have family members living with disabilities, the investment that you have put in, both financially and physically, you know, to ensure that they succeed. So I want to thank you for coming on today's program. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the investment that you're making.
Thank you
for educating us. And
to invite the media for the trainings.
Most definitely, and we'll be definitely happy to share and partner with you, whichever way you deem fit. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you for having us.
You're most welcome. We'll take a short break right now. When we return, there's more on the weekend show. Don't go anywhere.